Today we're going to be taking a look at a free plugin by Red Rock Sound called HLF-3C, which is a passive low-cut and high-cut filter. This is a digital emulation of an analog piece of hardware. I really wanted to see if this plugin added some sort of analog character and vibe, or if it's basically no different than a transparent digital EQ. Here's a quick look at the actual hardware that this plugin is based off of. You can tell it has the exact same controls, and that's quite an expensive piece of analog hardware. If they were able to accurately recreate it in the digital format, this might be a really cool plugin. Now let's test this plugin on some sources to see if it adds any analog character. The first test I have for this plugin, I have two instances of HLF-3C. One is on a guitar chord strum part, and one is on a top picked guitar part. You can see the settings I have right here. Oversampling is set to 4x on both, high quality mode engaged. Here's what it sounds like. Let's take both of them out. Back in. To my ears, the low cut definitely sounds like it's doing exactly what it says it's doing, but the high cut doesn't really sound like it's cutting down to 3 kilohertz on that guitar chord strum. 12 kilohertz on the other one, kind of hard to differentiate. I think a great comparison now is going to be those exact settings on Logic Stock EQ. You can see right here I've matched the exact settings I had on HLF-3C, but using Logic Stock plugin. It's on the same two guitar sources. We're going to flip back and forth between them to see if there's really any difference. And you will see I added 0.4 dB of makeup gain to Logic Stock EQ. I noticed that when inserting, I saw this on an analyzer, when inserting HLF-3C it adds 0.4 dB of gain to the signal. Okay, now let's go back and forth. You can definitely hear that Logic EQ with the same 12 decibel per octave cut is rolling off a lot more of the high end on both parts, in my opinion. So now you've heard what HLF-3C does on individual sources, but I feel like it would be better to hear it in the context of a full mix. This isn't exactly a full mix, but it's a short little demo I put together using some different instrument sources, and I only used HLF-3C when possible and a couple other plugins. What I've set up here for this little comparison to these demos is one of them is going to have HLF-3C on all sources, one's going to have no processing other than the other plugins I discussed, Chow Tape, Kickstart, but it's not going to have HLF-3C or Logic Stock EQ, and then one is going to have Logic Stock EQ with settings that are matching HLF-3C. So let's hear the difference between all of those. Let's start with HLF-3C on this demo. Here's the same demo, no filter processing. HLF-3C. Logic Stock EQ. HLF-3C. as you could hear, even HLF-3C compared to the same settings on Logic Stock EQ are drastically different. You lose a lot more high end on Logic Stock EQ because, as you saw with the analysis, you're actually kind of boosting 8K and up when you turn on the 15 kilohertz cut on HLF-3C. So I'm almost brightening up the track by cutting the highs, which is kind of odd to think about and counterintuitive. But it also shows you how powerful just using a simple filter plugin is. I mean, the difference between the unprocessed and the processing with HLF-3C and all other plugins identical, which are very few, you can really lock certain elements into the context of a mix just by filtering them well. Here's the difference between HLF-3C and no filter processing again. You can hear that I'm losing quite a bit of low end in certain sources on the HLF-3C example, which was intentional. I wanted to roll off some of the low end on, serum keys. I'm cutting 250 hertz and below, and I'm actually rolling off the highs down to 1.5 kilohertz. It's not exactly that, as you saw. On the keys, I'm low cutting 150 hertz. For the clean drone pad, I was rolling off all the way up to 500 hertz, cutting everything below 500 hertz and using some of that high-end boost with the 15 kilohertz cutoff. For the bass, I rolled off 50, and it didn't make a huge difference in terms of the tone of the bass. You're hearing a lot of the bass pop out from probably 80 hertz to 250 hertz with easy bass. And I rolled off some highs. Once again, it's not rolling off too much. Let me solo the drums for you so you can hear exactly what this plugin is doing in terms of helping the drum kit as a whole fit into the mix, because this is being used on basically a drum bus. So here's those drums, and I'm going to toggle HLF-3C on and off. There's off. Sub is too boomy. A little too sharp, high end on the hi-hat. That's a big improvement, in my opinion, just from a low cut and a high cut. This is a great example, in my opinion, because it also shows something that I really wish HLF-3C had, is maybe a 40 hertz low cut or even a 30 hertz low cut. Now let's compare the settings that I had on HLF-3C on that drum kit to Logic Stock EQ. Now here's that. Those high cuts aren't even close, even though they're at the same frequency, 4,000 hertz and 4,000 hertz. Let's try rolling this up to maybe like 8K, see if that's a little bit more similar. Sorry for the little glitching when I was switching between those. Those are the settings I found on Logic Stock EQ that most closely matched the settings I had on HLF-3C, which was the 50 Hz 12 dB per octave low cut and the 4 kilohertz 12 dB per octave high cut. And it's not even close to that, as you can see on Logic Stock EQ. I was doing a low shelf at around 4,000 kilohertz, which I guess is actually pretty close, but that's the shelf. And then the high cut actually starts to occur around 8K, which is what I saw on the analyzer, and so using my ears, I did match them pretty closely. But it does show you also that HLF-3C is not doing what it says it's doing, and you need to mix with your ears. And using an analog model plugin like this, yeah, that's the point, is you mix with your ears more. But also, at the same time, you can't achieve anything close to what you can achieve with Logic stock EQ using HLF-3C. You know, a standard parametric EQ is going to offer a lot more than a low-cut and high-cut filter. I get that. But you really can't roll off a lot of high frequencies with this HLF-3C plugin, so keep that in mind. Here's a closer look at why HLF-3C sounds so much different than Logic stock EQ. In terms of the low frequency response between Logic stock EQ and HLF-3C, they're almost identical. I bumped Logic's low cut up to 54 Hz to match them even closer, but things get really weird when you engage the high cut on HLF-3C. Watch as I drag this down to 15 kHz. You get a huge bump here of about 1.2 decibels from 8 kHz up to about 20 kHz. So instead of cutting 15 kHz, it's actually boosting 8 kHz to 20 kHz by over a decibel. It's a very unique behavior, and that's with oversampling set to 4. Watch when I turn oversampling down. Okay, less of a bump there, and it's tiny, tiny cut, not a big deal. And then oversampling off. Now you get a much different cut, and here is a 15 kHz cut, 12 dB per octave on Logic. Much different. So now around here, you're cutting at about 19 kilohertz with the 15 kilohertz engaged. It's very strange, and I'm not sure if this is an exact model of the hardware or if it's just the behavior of the plugin, but it's definitely a lot more unique than a standard digital filter. And here's with oversampling. I can't confirm if this is the behavior of a Pultec. I actually brought up T-Rax5 EQP1A, which is a Pultec emulation, to see how similar the high cut on HLF-3C is to a standard Pultec, and I can tell you the low cut is not identical at all. But the high frequency cut does appear to be a lot more similar. Here we go, high cut at 8 kHz. Not EQP1A. Yeah, high frequency, 8 kHz. Okay, so that is actually pretty close. That's kind of interesting. With an attenuation of 2.3. Those almost perfectly match. Now let's compare HLF-3C to a transparent, clean, digital EQ, Brainworks Digital V3. Let's start with a 50 Hz low cut, 12 dB per octave. Okay, very similar. If I bump this low cut on BX-V3 to 54, it's going to be a lot closer. Yep, almost identical. And now let's look at the kind of strange high-end behavior. Oversampling set to 4x. High cut at 12. But let's do the same thing, 12 dB per octave, and cut at 12K on BX-V3. Completely different behavior. With HLF-3C, you're actually boosting up above 10K. If I bring HLF-3C's high cut filter down, you can't really get close to what the digital EQ is doing. If I turn oversampling off, you can get a little bit closer with HLF-3C. But you're still kind of getting that shelving behavior and a very unique curve. Check out some of the weird stuff I had to do on Brainworks Digital V3 to match the settings that I had on HLF-3C. Here's a standard 50 Hz low cut. That was easy, they're almost identical. But then this 6000 Hz high cut on HLF-3C, I had to do a very wide Q cut of 1.5 dB at 7.6K. Then a high shelf up 3.5 decibels at 20K, while also using a high cut 12 dB per octave at 15K. And you can get close, you can get really close, but not identical to it. So that's kind of interesting. A lot easier to just turn one knob if that's the sound you're looking for. I've set both plugins back to their default settings. Now let's take a look at the harmonic analysis. If HLF-3C is based off of a piece of hardware, it should be doing some sort of saturation, adding some sort of harmonics and coloring the sound. And if I flip over to harmonic analysis, you can see that HLF-3C actually is. It's adding A little bit of harmonics here, a small little series, and with the high oversampling, you're not getting any foldback aliasing, which is nice. Over the course of an entire mix, those harmonics may build up and add some analog character to the sound. I like that it's adding just a little bit of harmonics. Now if I unmute BXT3, no harmonics, just the fundamental frequency, which is how it should be for a transparent EQ. I've never used another Red Rock Sound plugin, but it does appear that they care about the quality of their plugins, and this is a pretty cool freebie. Might be worth picking up if you're interested in some digital recreations and emulations of analog hardware. But I also don't think it's something you have to have. It's just a neat little tool, and it's cool that they gave it away for free. If you think that HLF-3C is something you want to use in your mixes, I'll leave a link in the description. You can go to their website and download it for free. Here's a little bit of background about the plugin. Red Rock Sound HLF-3C completes the passive EQ collection. This plugin has 12 dB per octave low and high cut filters, providing broad retrotonal sculpting or bygone era special effects, without the inconvenience of insertion loss found with the unamplified passive hardware. You can easily subtract the unnecessary frequencies in any instrument and subgroup so they can stay wonderfully musical in the mix. The original HLF-3C hardware unit is a true passive design. There are no input-output amplifiers, and it does not require any external power. As a result, there is an inherent loss of signal when using the HLF-3C hardware. The Red Rock Sound HLF-3C plugin compensates for this inherent signal loss for simplified use in the modern era. It has unity gain upon insertion. There is no insertion loss until one or both of the cut filters is engaged. The HLF-3C interface is very simple and includes only 3 controls. Extremely simple plugin, not very difficult to use. It also has oversampling right here, up to 8 times, and a high quality mode, as well as a few presets. But due to how simple this plugin is, there's basically no need for the presets, in my opinion. Thanks so much for taking the time to check out this video. I hope you learned something from it. Check out this plugin if you're interested, and stick around for more videos. I'll try to put some more comparison videos like this out there. Thanks again.